Should Christians have a reserve of food and basic supplies? And is that not trusting in God? So faith in God doesn't mean being unprepared. We can both trust in God and be ready for disaster, and that is a biblical principle. In fact, it would be foolish to not use the resources that God has given us to be prepared. It would be foolish, for instance, to expect that we can just be wasteful, spend and use everything we have, and that God will actually reward us for that later when hard times come. And the Bible actually talks about this. In Proverbs 6, we read this. It says, "Take a lesson from the ants, you lazy bones, and learn from their ways and become wise. Though they have no prince or governor or ruler to make them work, they labor hard all summer, gathering food for the winter." And then in Proverbs 21, it says, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." And literally that last verse says that wise people store up food and resources, but foolish people spend it all. Some people have thought that the story of the rich man with the barns in the New Testament that Jesus tells is evidence that we should not save up things for the future. We should just live with whatever we have today and trust God with whatever we're going to need in the future. But Jesus told that story not to say that we should not have extra resources, but to point out that this man's faith was in all of his extra resources. He did not have faith in God. That's why he was foolish. He had faith in all of his stuff. You can both be wise and store up for the future and have faith in God to provide, and even provide through those things that he's given you and blessed you with ahead of time to store up for the future. So that would be the principle I would take away from Proverbs. Now, also, you can look at how God used Joseph to prepare for the disaster in the Middle East by storing up food, not so he could become wealthy, not at all, but so that he and his family could be saved, and many other families could be saved and survive those hard times that were ahead for them. So I think that the biblical principle is to be prepared for disasters. I am not a prepper expert at all. I know there are some prepper experts in our church, and some of them have given me advice at different times that's been very, very helpful. I think it is wise to have a few months worth of long-term food storage ready for you and your family. Ideally, the food storage that will last you, a couple of decades or more. And also, I think it's probably best for it not to be the pre-made meal stuff, but kind of the basic elements of food preparation that you can use, flour and oats and beans and rice and things like that to make meals from as a storage up for the future, just in case. There's actually a place you can go to get those resources in the St. Louis area. It's called the Home Storage Center. It's from the Mormon Church, but they're really big into this stuff for their own theological reasons. But a side benefit of this is they have lots of these 30-year-long storage options for food that can be just a really wise thing to have on hand in case you need it. You also want some kind of heat source, like a propane heater that can be used safely indoors. That can be good. A generator is a good thing to have, maybe a solar generator so that you can charge it using solar panels as well. There are lots of places you can look online and on YouTube to get more information on that. And you just have to decide what makes sense for you. For me, it's something that I've had enough experience with in the past, either in other countries or even in this country, that I find it wise to be prepared for some of these things. So I've always had a generator and certain emergency items on hand that I've needed, both for personal safety and for just basic survival and living. And at times we've had to use them. In fact, every time I go camping, for me, that's an opportunity to test out my emergency gear and just make sure that we stay ready and have the things that we need. But one time back in Virginia, we had an unexpected storm come through and it knocked out power for 2 weeks. When you lose power, when a whole community loses power for 2 weeks, crazy stuff happens. Stores go empty within 48 hours and they don't get restocked for a long time. Stoplights don't work. Emergency services are overloaded. People break into homes and businesses and steal stuff left and right. It does not take long at all for things to get kind of crazy and for resources to be gone when you are just out of power. That's all that happened. But if that goes on for a few days, crazy stuff can happen. So thankfully, at the time, the place that I worked got power back relatively quickly. So that helped us to be able to go use that during the day. But still, for 2 weeks, every night and whenever I wasn't working, we're at a house without power. So I had a generator outside and I was able to run power in and we had all the things we needed at that point. Thankfully, we did have enough food, but I could have seen a scenario where it would have gotten much worse very quickly. Oh, and by the way, that storm also devastated a bunch of houses. I mean, there was a house just a few houses down from us that was literally cut in half by a tree. So you compile enough of these kind of disasters, it's not hard to see a time where you might want to have some extra food on hand and a generator and other things like that if you're able to do that. And I think that if everyone in our church was ready and prepared with wisdom, like Proverbs says, for difficult times, that would not only provide for their families, but it would also be able to provide for other people, for neighbors, as an act of love. And it would demonstrate the love of Christ to be ready in that way and able to help people in that kind of a scenario. I know there's a whole rabbit trail we could go down with regard to this stuff, and that's not what this is about. But to the question of, is it wrong for Christians to be prepared for disasters by having some stores of food and resources and supplies? No, I don't think it's wrong. I actually think it's wise.